And I mean, we've seen this, right? Nobody is exempt from challenge, from adversity, from obstacles. We all have it in our life. It's going to come sooner or later. That's what the 41 life is, though. Overcoming those challenges, overcoming those obstacles as they come at us and coming out stronger on the other side. So that's what we're here for. That's what we're about. We want to provide encouragement. We want to help people to keep going through those times, and we want to have some fun along the way. This is the 41 life. Let's get into it. All right, everybody. We are back again for another week. This is episode 5. I'm David.
And I'm Devin.
And like the intro said, this is the 41 life. We're excited to have you guys with us. And we hope y'all's week was good. Hopefully, a little better than ours was. It was pretty chaotic. For those of you guys that don't know, we're in upstate South Carolina, the Greenville area. And Hurricane Helene came through and definitely made her presence known. There's been a lot of damage in the area in the last week, and fortunately, it seems like there's a lot of good, rebuilding efforts going on. A lot of people are getting power back. I know some people were just getting it back today, and it was a week ago that it hit.
Yeah, it's definitely felt just kind of like eerie.
Yeah,
around town, like it's kind of unbelievable, like the damage that it did. I feel like I spoke to a lot of people this week at the store that were like, we just had no idea that was coming. Like, I know, it was forecasted in the news and everything, but I don't think anyone anticipated it to be as strong as it was.
No, from the sounds of it, it kind of took a turn at the last minute that veered it a little bit more into the direction of the mountains, like kind of where we're at. And then Asheville got hit really hard. And I feel like whenever you mix, I'm not a meteorologist, but I feel like whenever you mix a hurricane with a lot of wind and a lot of rain with mountains, it just, kind of amplifies everything. And so
it's been really cool though to see like the way that Greenville has come together for Asheville, because I don't know what all efforts are going on, to help Asheville, but locally there's a helicopter company that just is a tourist attraction, and people have been bringing donations to them, and they've been flying it there.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen it on the news, and I've seen it on Instagram, and we've donated a little bit, and it's insane everything that's going over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see, like you said, just, people helping people, and, bad situations like this, I feel like bring that out a lot, but also you hate that situations like this are kind of sometimes what's required for that to happen. So
and we're fortunate we had very minimal damage. We had, I don't know exactly what happened, if the shingles got blown off or what, but we had a leak of all the places right over our bed. So
we had water spots. Like,
it didn't come through, but it was like gathering right above the drywall. So we were like, please don't break through.
Fortunately, we were able to get somebody out, and seems like everything's all right. But
I know a lot of people had it a lot worse.
Absolutely. We had some people in our neighborhood that had trees fall, it looked like, on their house, and it was kind of hard to tell from, the angles and everything you could see. But all that to say, our prayers are with everybody that's affected by Hurricane Helene, and we are looking for ways to recommend to you guys if anybody's interested in relief efforts. We didn't want to just throw out, a generic thing. I feel like those are pretty widespread, but like Devin said, if there's, whether it be local opportunities to help out or ways that, we see as really credible and something that we feel good about recommending, we'll try to bring that to you guys in the upcoming weeks, because I don't think this is something that's going to be repaired quickly. But it's a good opportunity for, like we said, people to help people. And we know if you're listening to this, then you're one of those people that want to help people, and we want to help you do that. So we'll work and research and find some suggestions for you guys. But that was a pretty crazy part of our week. And alongside that, on some, I guess, better news, a better note for me personally, at least.
Yeah.
I had my last chemo treatment last week, which I know a lot of people have been keeping up with that, and I'm incredibly appreciative and grateful for that. But I did finish my last treatment last week, and hopefully now it's just time to recover. I had been doing treatment for 5 or 6 months.
Long time.
So it's
Felt like
kind of,
an eternity.
yeah, it does feel like that. And so it's kind of hard for me to even wrap my head around being done and just not having to go into the doctor and, sit there for hours and get the infusion and,
Mm-hmm.
Kind of the cycle of what we got used to over the last handful of months. But that's a good thing. I'm obviously very happy about that. And I feel like Devin's probably pretty
Very.
relieved too, because
Yes.
like we talked about, I think it was the last episode, she is very much an empath and feels a lot of the effects. So I think by association, she's probably going to feel a little bit better in
Yeah,
itself
probably
from
will.
that. So that's good. That's good. But another cool thing that, as we were kind of getting ready for this episode, that we talked about was where we're getting to in this story, where we're starting at being at the hospital, was 3 years ago to the day of October 7th.
Yep.
And this is going to be coming out, I believe, on October 8th. And so the day before is kind of a cool day for me, because it's exactly 3 years to the day that, like we talked about, this treatment was done. But technically this is a recovery week. So Monday is my first day being quote unquote real chemo free. And it's 3 years to the day of my original diagnosis that news is there. So that is kind of a weird, surreal thing. We talked about it, and I feel like, God kind of works in that way. Is like, that's a biblical thing, the number 3. So that was kind of cool to think about, kind of cool to see. And another thing that we talked about when I first got my diagnosis, one of Devin's mom's friends, it's kind of a mouthful.
Yeah.
Her name's Kelly. She sent us a gift, and it was a mug that said, "This is my chemo mug, and when this is done, I'm going to smash this into 1,000,000 pieces."
Yeah.
And for some reason, we have not smashed it into 1,000,000 pieces.
But we're going to.
Yes.
Next week.
Yes. So the 3-year mark, whether we just forgot up to this point to do that, or, we didn't feel like we were quite done with everything or out of the woods, we're smashing that bad boy on Monday. Yep. And it's going to be fun. So we'll probably put up a video of that, so you guys will probably see it. But I'm personally looking forward to that, because I feel like that's pretty good symbolism. So yeah, with that, we took a little detour last week. Went down the business avenue that Devin had since she was a little girl, basically everything being put into works. And yeah, so we wanted to talk about that, because that kind of ties in and overlaps with where we held up, or where we stopped at the hospital and emergency room. And so that's where we're going to pick up this week, because that we got talking about it, and there was a lot more to it, I think, than we kind of anticipated. And so we didn't get to quite circle back, but that's where we're starting this week. And when we left off at the emergency room,
you had just called me and told me to come over.
Yes, I had just gotten admitted to the back. The nurse was very concerned about my blood pressure. That's really, at this point, all we knew that was going on. My heart rate was high, but, I feel like a lot of people, when they go to the emergency room or hospital or doctors, like they, get a little anxious. Maybe the heart rate goes up a little bit. And so we didn't realize at the time mine was way higher than it should have been, even for that. So yeah, why don't you start off kind of once you got that call, what was going through your head, kind of what your response was?
I will say too, I think leading up to knowing that we were going to be going through this story, I had a bit of anxiety, because we're really getting into the thick of like the trauma that has occurred over these past 3 years. And I think just going back and digging into the details, it's not a time that I like to go back and revisit in my mind too much if I can help it. But even with that, we're going to get into it. We're going to dive into it. Probably be therapeutic in a way too.
Yeah, I feel that way too. I actually said that exact same thing last night, that, knowing we were going to be recording this, that I feel like through this whole process, I've basically been in survival mode. And now I feel like I'm starting to get out of that a little bit and start to process a little bit better. And so going into this, it was like, I'm sure it will be pretty therapeutic, but I don't really feel great in my stomach about this. And I don't usually talk about that aspect of
Yeah.
things. So, I was saying that it's not always the easiest thing for me to kind of dive into like those vulnerable and just kind of like sad and down feelings, I guess. And I mean, there was a lot of like, especially at this part in the story, there was a lot of doom and gloom that was going on. There was a lot of not necessarily that we were feeling, but it just kind of seemed like you hear the word cancer and you get kind of terrified. You start to evaluate a lot of aspects of life, and so to kind of rehash some of that and get back into it, and quite honestly, I probably haven't sifted through it, as well as I need to. So I do think this will be good. I think that there will probably be moments that I don't feel so good about in my stomach as we're talking about it. But that's the point of this podcast. That's what we want to do, and show that those feelings are real. They're there, but you can also have that and continue to persevere through difficult times and challenges that you're going to face. And
see that we made it to the other side.
Right.
Everything that we've endured, we made it to the other side.
Absolutely.
And I feel like getting to the other side has more impact when you understand the journey better.
Yes.
I was worried like about remembering because I tend to block things out when they upset me, not by choice. So hopefully I can recall the details. I have some vivid memories of that day and things that happened. And I think too, like if you tell your story, like things will probably come back to my mind and stuff. But I definitely remember exactly what the room looked like.
Yeah.
I remember what the nurses' faces looked like. I remember it was a very long day. We sat there for hours.
And I think I got there at like 9 o'clock, and I don't think, I ended up having to go to the main hospital in town, and I don't think I got there until like 8 o'clock at night. So I mean, and this was this was probably a 10 by 10, might even be generous
room. And it was
room.
mask time, so we'd keep our masks on the whole time. And I remember they took your heart rate and it was high. They took your blood pressure, it was high. And then what is it that they do when they're like measuring your
it was either an ECG or an EKG.
Yeah. So they did an EKG. And
I had to get the monitor or the heart, get hooked up everywhere with all the electrodes and everything.
And I don't know how in the world, but your EKG came back pretty good.
Relatively normal, and that was honestly, that was probably the most, it wasn't necessarily confusing, but that in the moment was very confusing because they were like it led to, I think, things being taken a little bit less seriously because they're like, well, your heart's beating fine.
Yeah.
Everything's blood flow's good.
You had mentioned, and I think at this point you were not concerned. I had always been concerned, obviously.
Yeah.
But something in me was like really getting concerned. And you were trying to play it down to the doctor.
Yeah.
You were like, well, I have been struggling with anxiety, and all of this stuff. And I remember the doctor being like, this probably is anxiety. Anxiety can be really powerful. It can do a lot of things to your body. And I just remember being like, this is not anxiety. And I remember telling the doctor, I'm like, his ribs have been popping out of place. And I feel like that's relevant to what's going on.
Yeah.
And I just kind of remember him looking at me like, what? He was kind of like, okay, like, I don't see how this is relevant to, high blood pressure or anything like that. But I just felt very strongly, and I don't know if God just put that on my heart to really push that and say that. And I felt very strongly that it was related because I felt like all of these pieces were like kind of coming together in my head.
Yeah.
Like your high blood pressure, your night sweats, the rash that you had, your ribs popping out of place. Like something in my brain was like, I think all of these things are connected to each other. Because originally we never thought the ribs popping out of place had anything to do with your other issues of not being able to breathe well and stuff.
Well, and I should add a little bit, like when we talk about not being able to breathe well, we're not just talking like a little shortness of breath. I mean, it was like just walking to and from the kitchen, I would get
Yeah.
completely winded.
Mm.
When I was at the field, like, I remember it got to the point where I was not doing my conditioning because I was winning the day if I could just go out and throw
Yeah.
and be a normal person.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and you had gone for a run the day before you threw up blood or coughed up blood,
yeah,
and you had to stop.
yeah.
You couldn't even make it down the street.
I completely forgot. So our neighborhood, we live in townhouses, so there's like a couple rows of townhouses, and you go out onto a main street, and it kind of like loops around another neighborhood. So I was like, I'm just gonna try to go run and see what I can do because at this point, I just wanted to move a little bit.
Mhm.
I was getting kind of stir crazy, just sitting around and doing nothing, and this is right when I got home from the season. The day before I went to the emergency room, and I planned to just go run probably a couple miles, not really thinking anything of it. And like I said, I don't know why I thought that I could do that, considering I
Yeah.
couldn't even hardly run to second base during our conditioning. Um, but I probably made it 100 feet out of our neighborhood. And I mean, it was hands on my knees, gasping for air, and I was just like, I'm going back home.
Yeah.
Like this was a complete failure.
Mhm.
And that was a big turning point too, where I told Devin, okay, something's really not right here.
Mhm.
But again, I thought it was just COVID. I thought that I was having
Yeah.
major after
We
effects.
thought anxiety too.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
that yeah, and we thought maybe it would get better. So
and so I feel like the doctor at this point was not concerned.
yeah, he was very
I just remember him really pushing the anxiety thing, that your
yes,
symptoms were in line with anxiety.
right.
And I remember being like, but there's this and that and this and that doesn't make sense with anxiety.
Hmm.
And I think at that point he was like, okay, well, we're going to do some blood work. We're going to, just double check, make sure everything looks good there. But if everything looks good there, I think it's probably anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they took your blood.
Yep. And he came back in with, I mean, very poised. Like he was a younger guy. You could tell that he was pretty early on in his
Hmm.
career. Like he was pretty young, but he kept it together pretty good. But you could just kind of sense there was a different demeanor, just like,
Yeah.
okay, we're going to take you back to get an x-ray now.
Yeah.
And we need to do this immediately.
Yeah. Whatever shows in your blood work that you're clotting
Yeah.
was
Well,
incredibly high for you.
I come to find out because we get all this stuff on my chart, and they got in there so quickly we didn't even see my chart.
Yeah.
So at the time we were just like, okay, I'm going to get an X-ray,
Yeah.
and we come back and find out that the clotting markers were incredibly high. We find out that I had multiple high markers for cancer detection,
Hmm.
and there were basically red flags for strokes, for heart attacks, pretty much everything you can imagine. So
Yeah.
um, I laugh at it now, but at the moment, we were kind of like, oh,
That's when the panic started to set in, I
that was
think.
the shift. That was the
Yeah.
big turning point. And I feel like for me, I was just like, this is not good.
Yeah.
Something's going down now.
And
Like,
I remember I just started to shake, like my whole body. I just started shaking
mhm,
because I think I was going into panic mode and
yeah.
I could just feel.
Yeah, and I was trying to keep it together, but I go in, I get the X-ray, we come back, and X-rays, if you guys have seen them, you know that they can be kind of hard to determine sometimes because it's a lot of shadows. And if you haven't, then well, they're kind of hard to detect because it's a lot of shadows. And so, the doctor comes back in with the X-ray, and we we've not really looked at. I mean, I've seen an
I don't
X-ray.
even know what an X-ray. I don't know what your heart's supposed to look like. I don't know anything. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So he comes in and he shows us, and he's like, okay, so we're going to take you back. We're going to get you a CT scan. That's going to be our next step. But I just want to show you a little bit of what's going on. So this is, your body. This is the scan, what we're looking at. And I could tell he like didn't want to say what he was thinking.
I just remember him
And
saying, "Do you see this giant shadow?
yeah,
That's not supposed to be there."
yeah. And we were like, okay, well, I don't know what it's supposed to look like normally. And
And
so
I think it was all happening so fast, it just wasn't registering. Nothing was registering with my brain.
mhm.
I don't know if it was defense mechanism, but I was just like, okay, like a shadow, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember he kept saying a mass. And normally in your right mind, you hear a mass and you know that's not good. But I
Right.
was just like, okay, you have
Yeah.
a mass. Like,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
So they had scheduled you for a CT.
Yes.
See.
Yeah. So um, CT scan is kind of, I would say, I've gotten so many of them at this point. I feel like I know what I'm looking at with those pretty well. It's a much more clear, mapped out image of basically what's going on in your body. I mean, you get to see a lot more detail with that. And so usually if they want to get a really clear cut picture, they'll do contrast with it, which basically just allows them to see, you know, metabolic activity going on, like masses, tumors, all that stuff. They take up what the contrast material is. They take that up much more quickly, so it shows up as a spot more easily determined on a scan. I don't know if I did contrast with this one right off the bat, but either way, I went in, got the scan, came back, and we're sitting there by ourselves for what felt like it was probably
That's,
only a couple minutes, but it felt like it
yeah.
was about 5 hours. And this is when the original nurse, who, like I said early on, super, super nice dude. Like
I
he,
remember really liking him a
yeah,
lot.
like I still to this day remember his face. Like he was notable because he did such a good job. Um, and he knocked on the door, and we were like, "Oh, what's going on? Oh God." And he was just like, "Hey guys, I just want to let you guys know that me and the rest of the staff were praying for you guys. You're gonna come out of this."
And we were like, okay.
And we had no idea what he
No one
was
had
talking
come to talk to us about the CT scan yet. I remember looking at you and I was like, I don't think that's good.
about. Yeah,
I was like, I don't think it's good that I said, why are they praying for us?
I know. And
I don't
so,
understand.
yeah, and shortly after that, the
No,
doctor,
we got my chart. Don't
yeah,
you remember that? We
yeah,
got my chart before the doctor came in and it said something along the lines of a mass in the chest likely to be either lymphoma, germ cell cancer, or something
or
else.
leukemia.
So, and
Yeah,
I remember we just looked, like I read it out loud and we just looked at each
yeah,
other.
because it's a lot different feeling when words are actually put to your fears,
Mm-hmm.
and to see that written out, that it was basically confirming, like, oh, for months now you've been worried something's wrong. Not only is something wrong, it's one of the scariest things in life that people deal with.
And you guys are not going to believe this, what I'm about to say. But the night before, David had planned to go to the doctor. I'm not lying. He looked at me and he said, I feel like something is really wrong. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I just feel like it's something really bad. I think I might have cancer.
I did say that.
And I freaked out when you said that.
You were like, don't you dare say that. Why would you think that? Why would you
I
say
said,
that?
why
And
would you put that out there?
I was like,
I said, I rebuke that.
I
I
know,
rebuke that.
I know, and I was like, whoa, 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 like I'm just
And
telling
I
you.
had a very overreaction to you saying that. So
Yeah,
I think I might have sensed as well that it wasn't it just a bad feeling,
yeah.
which I'd
So
had for a while, but
yeah, so we're pretty much I mean, shell shocked at the moment. I mean, like it pretty
it was
much.
really bizarre looking back to see how we handled it. Because I don't know if you remember this, but we would like cry and then make jokes and then cry and then be okay and then cry. Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
I
Like
mean,
it was so interesting to see our brains try to process
yeah,
what was
and
going on.
I feel like we each had. I mean, obviously, we had two different reactions to it. Like there was a lot of overlap, but I'm still feeling terrible.
Yeah.
I'm still, like you're getting the news that this is happening to me, and I'm getting the news that this is happening to me, but I also feel everything.
And I felt like every hour that passed, it got scarier and scarier.
Yeah. Well, especially because you could sense that as more and more depth was uncovered to this, it
Hmm.
just kept getting worse and worse and worse. At first, it was,
So,
okay, maybe this is anxiety and you're having, bad issues with that. Oh, okay, well, there's a mass. Maybe it's just something going on in your chest because you have a lot of, it was in my chest cavity, and you have a
mhm.
lot of empty space in your chest cavity. And so,
just to put things into perspective, and maybe we should share a picture of this. The tumor was the size of a cantaloupe.
Yeah.
Pushing his heart down into his stomach,
Yep.
squeezing all of his veins and arteries in that area.
Yep.
His windpipe was at like 20% capacity.
It was
10% capacity. He had fluid in his lungs, around his lungs.
Around my heart. And so we come to find out that's what caused the incidents with me passing out, is because I was having so much pressure on my heart.
And you were clotting, actively clotting.
Yes, they did confirm that I was basically on the verge of a blood clot, and if that was to happen, I would have died on the spot.
He was, not only are we figuring out like, hey, you have cancer, but it was like your heart attack risk, stroke risk, like in this very moment right now, you could die.
Not only did they say you could, they actually used the words, it's a miracle that you're here right now.
Yeah.
They said, first off, that exercise the previous day. Then the reason we made sure to mention that, they said that should have killed you on the spot. They said every time that you did conditioning, you were putting yourself basically in a 50-50 position to where you could have had a heart attack or a stroke on the field. All the times that my rib head,
you were flying.
Yeah, we were traveling. We were
to Colorado.
Yeah. So all this to say, the doctors were really laying this out for us in a way that, quite honestly, like, I shouldn't be here telling this story to you guys.
Yeah.
There's been so many incidents even before we were aware. It's so weird for me to say, but like, it should have killed me on the spot. And it's only really by God's doing that nothing happened, or something did happen, but like the fact that nothing, that ended my life happened.
And to put things into perspective, they were like, we need to transport you to a bigger hospital immediately, which was the downtown Greenville hospital. We were at the hospital near our house. And they were like, but it's going to take a minute because we need a specifically certified team to transport you.
They needed a cardiac
arrest team to transport you, because you could have a heart attack any second, and you're probably going to have a heart attack any second.
Yeah.
And not just anyone can transport you via ambulance.
Yeah. Yeah. So
this team had to come to the hospital that you were at and take you to Greenville.
And the weirdest part, I don't know if you remember this or not, but I do. One of the guys that was, because I had to get strapped into a gurney and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very weird scene, because this guy, like, who's strapping me in, he's like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like I should be the one strapped into this thing, not you. You seem perfectly fine. What's going on? And I was like, well, it's been and this is where the jokes come in. I was like, it's been quite the day. We
were still making jokes as we did.
Yeah, I was just joking around, making light of it, and he was just like, whoa, are you serious? Like, you just found this out? And I was like, yeah. He's like, man, you just look so fine, so healthy.
And I don't know if you remember this too, but there was an incident where the nurse came in to check on you, and one of your pupils was huge and the other one was tiny.
Yeah.
And I kid you not, 10 doctors rushed into this tiny room.
Yeah. Oh,
and pushed me and pushed me back. Like, I was like back up against the wall because they thought you were having a stroke.
Yeah.
And I think we ended up figuring out that it had to do with the way that the tumor was pressing on a nerve or something. Like,
yeah, it was basically the way it was pressing. It was like preventing oxygen from getting literally to my eyes.
Yeah.
So one of them, I don't know which one, that, if you're a doctor out there, you probably know.
Yeah.
But one of my eyes was not getting oxygen, which was either causing it to get big, to dilate, or,
so
whatever.
They thought they were coming in ready to treat you for stroke.
Yeah.
I don't know how we processed that day, all that information so quickly.
Well, I feel like in that moment, it's kind of like your instincts kick in a little bit. It's the fight or flight, I guess. And in that moment, I think really just kind of saw like, okay, we just got to deal with this. We just got to go. Like, we just got to kind of do what we can. And as we went through everything, we were processing and handling it, but you can only, you take little bites at a time.
Mm-hmm. your brain can only comprehend so much.
Yep.
And that's why I was saying it was so interesting to look back to see how we would laugh and then cry, laugh and then cry. Because it was almost like we were processing it and our brains would be like, oh, we need a break now.
Yeah.
Like dissociate. You know what I mean? And I just remember when because I couldn't ride with you in the ambulance because COVID.
Yep.
And
That was awful. God, that was awful.
I remember them rolling you away thinking, is he going to die?
Yeah.
Like, is this the last time I'm going to see him?
Meanwhile, right before that, like when we kind of had answers, Devin filled her family in. I had to make phone calls to my mom and dad and like tried to fill in like our close friends, basically what was going on. And so word was getting around pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember who I told or how it got there, but somehow like the Rays team found out, the Orioles, like
everyone found out. I don't know how it. Well, I think we just told a few people, and then.
Oh, I mean,
I was just texting my friends like, what that we played with, and I was just like, you guys need to like pray hard.
Yeah.
Like we're in a really bad situation right now.
Yeah, and word spread very quickly. So a whole lot of stuff was happening at once, and meanwhile, I'm getting loaded up into this specially equipped ambulance.
Yeah.
And not sure what's going on, what's happening next, where, kind of what's about to unfold. So I get to the hospital. Thankfully, nothing crazy happened. Had the full equipped team on standby, ready just in case. But fortunately, nobody was needed. Nothing. But at that point, like I said, I'm strapped into a gurney, so my phone's going crazy. I can't really update anybody with what's going on, and something about me. Like I will put myself to the side and make sure other people are doing okay.
Yes, so true.
So that was killing me. It was killing me that I knew that my mom, my dad, my close friends, my family, like my wife, I mean, above all else, like I couldn't even be with her. All these people were so concerned and I just like wanted to make it better. I just wanted to assure everybody like, it's okay. I'm going to be okay. Like we're going to get through this. But meanwhile, I'm literally strapped in and can't move. And I'm in this ambulance with strangers who are just, chit chatting with me. Mm-hmm. And the second that they found out that I played baseball, all this medical stuff was out the window. They wanted to hear about that. And so it was a very, very kind of weird conundrum to be in. But I get, to the hospital, like I said, no issues, but Devin had a much different experience while I was being transported over there. I was also I was very mad that they wouldn't let me drive.
Yeah, you wanted me to drive you.
Yeah, because and
I was like,
guys, I've made it this far. Nothing's gonna happen on this drive over there.
And I was like, there is no way I'm driving you over there.
Yeah,
I was like, if you walk out of here, I'm not driving you. You're gonna have to walk because
I was like, I'll drive myself. I drove myself here this morning. Obviously that didn't happen, but that was my mindset.
When you left, I went home to get you your contacts, like an overnight bag, all this stuff. And my mom was waiting for me at the house, and I remember that right after they took you away, like I had to sign some papers or something, and they handed me some paperwork and they handed me some pamphlets. Mm-hmm. And this is what I mean when I talk about blocking things out. Because as hard as I try, I can't remember what the pamphlet was. But I told people about it right after, so they remind me.
Yeah, I mean, I remember what you told me.
It was very upsetting to me, and I don't know, maybe a nurse or someone could shed light on what was possibly given to me. But
I mean, I can tell you, I remember.
It was like death. It was something about death.
It was literally a pamphlet about what to do, how to cope with the death of
a loved one or something like that. Yeah,
and what to do after the diagnosis. Like basically these.
All these pamphlets, like I just remember it being about death.
Yeah.
I remember being upset and telling people it was about funeral arrangements, which I don't think that's what it was.
I do remember. I remember there was a funeral arrangement packet in there because I remember your mom told me you'll never believe what was in that because you had just told her.
Yeah. And I'm like, surely that can't be true, but that's what I told her. I don't, like I said, personally, I can't vouch for this because I have no memory of what it looked like or anything, but I just remember the whole time, like I said, like my body was shaking and I was like kind of crying, but like also in shock. And I remember it was pouring rain outside, and my car was far away. And I remember I picked up the phone and I called my best friend Steph, and I lost it. I was like screaming in the phone to her.
Yeah.
And I don't know what I said, but I remember her being like, Devin, like, what is going on? See, this is like why I don't want to talk about it, because it makes me emotional. But I remember we both just cried like on the phone together. And it was really, really scary. And I mean, that was terrible for her to have to like listen to that phone call. And I remember like I got home and my mom was there and we just hugged and cried. And I remember being like, okay, I'm going to go upstairs and pack David's bag, because I like was really anxious to get over to the hospital. And also too, like it was later in the night, so visiting hours were ending.
Yeah.
Which killed me.
Yeah.
And COVID, you couldn't have an overnight guest, which we'll get to that later because your surgeon overrode that. Do you remember?
Yeah.
He was like, you let that man's wife stay with him tonight.
Yeah. Well, and also my mom lived in Augusta at the time, so she was able to get over to us in Greenville pretty quickly. And so I think about the time that you were getting to the hospital is when she was getting in town. So you guys were trying to arrange everything, because I know she was freaking out and wanted to get in there. And because of COVID, I think you can only have
one person at a time, no overnight guest.
Yeah.
And I remember hiding, like not hiding, but you know how like when you're a kid and you're like up past your bedtime and no one's saying anything, so like you don't make any like sudden movements or anything. Like I was just like hoping that the nurse wouldn't come in and know that I was in there past, because she came in and she's like, hey, it's getting to be that time, like you need to head out. And I was like, okay, I will. And like time passed again, she didn't come for a while, and I was like, okay, like maybe she's not gonna come. And like she came in again. But how did you know that did your surgeon come in? Like what, do you remember what happened with that?
Yeah, so I guess I gotta kind of pick up where.
Well, I guess I didn't finish telling my story. Should I finish telling my story?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So we're all over the place. So I went up to our closet and I got down on my knees and I was like, God, you do not owe me anything. And you do not owe me my husband staying alive. Like in the Bible, you warned us over and over, like you will suffer and you will hurt and, you know, all of this stuff. So I think I'm thankful that I was to the point in my faith where I understood that. Mm-hmm. And I prayed, can you just tell me if I'm about to lose him? I don't want to be shocked. Mm-hmm. And clear as day, I heard he's not going to die.
Well, you heard a little bit more
specifically. I heard the sickness will not lead to death.
Yeah.
I mean, just like that.
Yeah, and that comes into play again shortly after this too.
And so I was like, okay. Like I felt like I had that word. I've been walking with God for a while, and I don't always hear him speak, but I feel like I know when he does. And I was like, I'm clinging to that like for the rest of this journey. And so I got up, packed the bag, got over to the hospital. And then you can talk about, I guess, what happened once you got to the hospital.
Yeah, so I get to the hospital and get, I guess, checked into my room. I don't really even know how. I just remember, boom, I was in a hospital. Yeah. And it was I was looking at a lot of ceiling tiles on a stretcher being brought over there.
And it killed me that you were doing that by yourself.
Yeah.
That you were alone. That killed me.
And you know, the weird thing is about that, this goes with what I was saying. Like, I hate seeing people that I care about, like, hurting and having a hard time.
Yeah.
So in this moment, I wanted to be alone.
Yeah.
Not because I wanted to be alone, but because I didn't want anybody else to have to go through any more hurt or difficulty, especially because of me, than they already were. Like, mm-hmm. I felt such a horrible sense of guilt, along with like questions of what's about to happen. Am I going to be okay? Like exactly what Devin was saying. Like I feel like there's still so much life ahead of us. Like I ain't leaving. That's like, that was kind of, my mindset. Like I'm here, I'm sticking around. I don't know how or why, but I'm doing it. And so all this is going through my head, and I get checked into this room. And, when you get to the hospital, especially when something is already known wrong, you get, I mean, God, you get a flurry of doctors coming in.
Yeah.
I
Well,
had,
you were a mystery case.
oh,
I mean, you had so much going on.
I mean,
And they're like, "What do we do first? What do we address first?"
I had
Like,
a neurosurgeon come in. I had a thoracic surgeon. I had a cardio specialist. I had a just general surgeon. I had nurses.
yeah.
And meanwhile, this is the first game of the playoffs. So I all day had been looking forward to the Rays were playing the Red Sox that night.
Mhm.
And my buddy Shane McClanahan was pitching that night. We were roommates that year during like the
We all three lived together.
yeah, like overlap COVID time. So
Me,
I
you, and
was like,
Shane.
I was just so excited to watch him pitch and especially in the playoffs and see our, the Rays do well. And so I got checked in at probably 7 o'clock or 6, 7, something like that. And that's about the start of the game. And so I get to the hospital and all these doctors are coming in and finally it starts to calm down. And I get the remote and I'm like, finally, I can just watch this game and just zone out for a minute, like think for a second. And I get this game turned on and a doctor comes in and I feel bad because I am very mellow. I'm very even keel. Not much gets me riled up, but at this point, I was just like my brain had taken as much as it could take. And this guy, super nice dude, such good intentions. He comes in and sits next to me, and I don't know if he was a surgeon. I think he was one on one of the surgery teams, and he was talking to me about some medical stuff, and he was like, "Are you doing okay?" I was like, I'm fine. Like I really just want to watch this game. I just feel like I need a second to just kind of exhale a little bit and just kind of process what I've just heard, what's been uncovered today. And he was like, "No, I think you need to look at me. Like take a second and are you okay? Are you understanding what's been told to you?" And I kind of snapped.
Well,
I
didn't he say like it's probably cancer?
Oh yeah, he was like, this is serious. Like this is probably cancer. Are you doing okay? Like are you process? Do you understand that?
Because you were so I wasn't there, but I just know you. You
Yeah,
were probably being so kind to all the doctors, making
yeah.
jokes,
I mean, and
like
and just being me.
yeah.
And I look at this dude square in the eye, and I say, dude, I need you to get out of my room right now. I understand. Not only do I understand that this is cancer or potentially cancer, it is cancer. I'm not sugarcoating this. I'm not trying to push this away. I literally just need a second to catch my breath because today has been a really difficult day for me. And
Yeah.
I just want to watch this baseball game because one of my friends is pitching right now and I would just really like to watch him and get my mind off of this. And he was just like, "Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, that's fine." I didn't see that guy the rest of my stay. And
He's probably
and
like, I'm done with that
yeah,
guy.
and if somehow this, I don't know how he would end up hearing this, but if he does, I'm really sorry for that. You caught me at probably one of the worst times of life. So, um, but as as this is happening, as I'm sitting there thinking I'm watching this game and Devin isn't there quite yet, like my mom's not there, everything had kind of settled down and I had just a couple minutes to just kind of like digest. And like Devin was saying, I just started praying and I was just like, God, like I don't know what is going on here. I don't know. I don't know what the plan is for this. I don't know why this is happening, but whatever you're doing, whatever the reasoning for this, just please, like the only thing I ask, I said, just make this a story that shows that you can fix broken things and redeem difficult situations. And this is going to sound crazy, but I'm sitting there, praying, like I said, all that. I finish up and off, close off my prayer. And two things clear as day came to my mind. Well, three things really. One was this sickness will not lead to death, which is weird because when me and Devin were talking later, she was like, that's what I heard clear as day. I was like, that's crazy. And I was like, okay, that's something we need to hold on to then. And in the moment, that was necessary. That was good. We didn't realize how much we needed that later on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a whole conversation that we'll get to in itself, that sometimes God gives you the things that you need in the moment and you think it's, or in a moment, and you think it's for that
But
moment,
a
but
lot
it's
of times
actually
it's
not.
for later on. Yeah.
Yes.
We've
But that
seen
was,
that a lot.
yes. And that was actually, it was a huge comfort to us during that time, but we didn't have to cling to that as much as we did later on. Like I said, we'll talk more about that as the story progresses, because it it gets even more wild.
Yeah, it does.
Um
There's lots of twists and turns in this
yes,
story.
yes. The second thing that came to my mind clear as day was the Bible verse. And I actually, if you go back and look on my Instagram or Twitter, like I posted this on, I don't know if it was the exact day, but it was like my post talking about all this. What you intended for harm,
Mm-hmm.
God intended for good.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that, like, I really had to cling to the whole time, because I feel like through this somehow there wasn't moments of like I wasn't angry. I haven't been angry with God.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't been, why me, why us, because I've just fought to trust that. And when I say I've fought to trust that, that's exactly what it is. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something that, you wake up every day in bad situations and say, oh, well, this is going to work out okay. This is going to be like, you have to go to war each day
Mm-hmm.
when your feet hit the ground, when your eyes open, whatever you want to say, and know that if you're in a situation that's difficult, we serve a big God who can do a lot of different things. And it's not just a medical diagnosis, it's a lot of different aspects of life. But that verse was something that was really helpful. And that verse is Genesis 50:20. If anybody wants to look that up, like that's something, like I said, that's a verse that's been very helpful to me. It's been something that I've clung to through this whole process. And the third thing that I feel like God was putting on my mind was the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they got thrown in the fire. Really, actually, it was the whole book of Daniel, but in particular, that one story really was resonating at that moment. And the main portion of what stood out to me about that was they had done nothing wrong. They lived their life faithfully, and their faith in the culture they were in actually was what led them to the punishment they were getting, because they refused to worship false idols. Specifically, the part that stood out is there's a portion, and depending on the translation, the language may be a little bit different, but it says they walked in the fire and they did not get burned, and there was a fourth man in the fire with them. And that was something that also I think we'll probably get to next episode, would be echoed, I guess. But that was such a good reminder, and what we need, that's something that in that moment I needed to hear so much, because it felt like we had just gotten dumped into molten hot lava all around us, being poured on us. And it felt like such a good reminder that faithfulness through it will allow you to continue to walk through this fire, and God will provide in ways that you may not see, and like we'll go through this fire and not get burned. And so far that really has been the case, because like I said, it didn't make sense how I was alive at that point, and it's even
Mm-hmm.
crazier as we go through this story even more, that I'm here right now telling this story. And so to this day, the whole book of Daniel is very, if you're looking for something to study, that's a cool book. I'd recommend it. But that story in particular was really helpful, and one of the things initially in that hospital room, that I feel like God gave us to
Mm-hmm.
to cling to.
You know, just thinking about earlier how we said like God gives you things ahead of time, and we were saying like we've seen that. So, like, he does that to me all the time. I don't know if that's just me, but like he'll give me something that I'm like thinking about, can't stop thinking about, can't stop processing it, and it's for something that 3 years down the road happens or whatever. But I remember it was 2018 and we lived in Baltimore. And I don't know if I was doing like a study on this or what, but it was John 9 where he says, it's this man is blind and Jesus heals him. And, back in those biblical times, they believed that like if you had a sickness or an ailment or whatever, it was because of sin.
Mm-hmm.
Like
yeah,
bad
either
things
you
didn't
did
just
something
happen.
wrong or
Yeah, it
your
was a
parents.
result of your actions.
Yeah.
Which is actually something that I had to work through a lot in therapy that was ingrained in me and that I didn't even realize, but we can get into that another time. Anyways, so the verse is, it wasn't that this man sinned or that his parents sinned, but that the works of God would be displayed in him. And I screenshotted that in 2018 and never deleted. And I'm like really like OCD, like I don't like extra stuff. So I'm always deleting pictures. Like I don't have a lot of pictures and I could never delete that picture because it just felt like something to me. And I also like really held on to that too throughout your journey because it was so easy to be like, did we do something wrong?
Yeah.
Because everything was so bad.
Yeah.
And it didn't stop being bad. It just got worse.
Yeah, it really did.
And I felt like God gave me that.
Yeah.
And started like putting that on my heart to think about so that when I faced this, I could know that it was not something that I did wrong. And I just think it's so cool that he prepared me in that way.
Yeah. There was I feel like a lot of stuff leading up to it that, looking back, it was kind of his hand in it, but we had no idea at the time.
Well, and your teammate, John Means, he lost his dad to cancer when you guys were playing together.
Yeah.
And I struggled so much with him losing his dad.
Oh, we both did.
In a weird way.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't let it go. Yeah. I thought about it all the time. Like it took me a really long time to process why bad things happen to good people. Like we prayed, why didn't he bring healing? Like why, all of these things.
Yeah.
And I think even just the way that God took me through processing that was a preparation of what was down the road for us.
Yeah.
Like looking back now, because I remember during the time being like, why is this affecting me so much?
Yeah.
I mean, like it was so heartbreaking, but like it was beyond a normal reaction, I guess. And looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, like you were preparing me even then.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like there's a whole lot of layers, especially with this point in the story.
Yeah.
And we could probably talk for another 2-3
good thing this
hours.
Is a weekly podcast.
Yeah.
But you were going to talk about, I asked you like what happened that your surgeon said that you could stay the night. I could stay the night. Do you remember?
I remember asking about the visitor policy. I said my wife's on her way and my mom's with her, my mother-in-law, and like my father, like I have a bunch of in-laws and stuff that are in town. Like what's the visitation policy? And asked the nurse that when I got there, and she said only one at a time. And I remember my surgeon said, oh, nobody's here with you right now, so my wife will be here soon, but I know that it's going to be a cycle of my family coming in and then they're going to have to leave. And he said, why do they have to leave?
Yeah.
And I said COVID, and he said she is not leaving you. She is going to be here with you tonight if she wants to be.
And I remember being like, yay. And then also being like, wait, why are you letting me break the rules? Like, yay, but oh no.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, a lot of layers.
That was day one.
Yeah.
We spent an hour talking about day one.
Yeah.
We're on day like 900 and 1,000 something now. So we got a long way to go.
Yeah. We'll see how it progresses, but we're trying to be as thorough as possible and, go through it in detail and, kind of give you guys what it looked like, what it is. I mean, try to be as open as possible.
And I think too, like, I feel like we both learned so much. Something that I struggle with in this podcast is like knowing how to even dive into it. And I think something that would be helpful for us is like, if anyone has any questions, we would love for you to ask them.
Absolutely.
What you like want us to talk about, like cancer, spiritual, like anything.
Yeah, we're rolling through it. But I mean, at the end of the day, like this is our story that we want to be able to be used and be, you know, helpful to somebody going through difficult times, or, you know, just wants to know different things going on. So let us know, like Devin said, like what you guys would like to hear. I mean, we're pretty flexible. We can pivot. We can, you know, dive into different aspects and different things, and we're more than happy to do that. We enjoy it, and that is actually very helpful for us to get suggestions, because like Devin said, sometimes the most difficult part is figuring out exactly what to dive into, what to focus on, what to, you know, what to not skip over or what to skip over. So,
but I think on that note, it's time to wrap it up.
Yep. I think that'll do it for this week. We've, as always, enjoyed having you guys. We're very appreciative. Thank you guys so far for all the support that you've given. We've seen the kind words that people have said, the ratings, the reviews. Continue to do that. It helps us. We see it. It's encouraging just to see the response, I guess, that we were hoping for people to have seems to be so far what they are having. And so continue to do that, continue to tell friends. And like Devin said, let us know if there's anything in particular that you guys want to hear about. But we will be back next week. And until then, I'm David.
And I'm Devin.
And this has been the 41 Life.
See y'all next week.
Thanks, guys.